Hello everybody, Stuart from Ricky here. In this video, I want to go over something a little bit different, and we're going to look at the approval process of various technologies and how you can go from building out your initial prompts to creating a live application and having everything reviewed and in compliance with that technology. Today, we're going to look at OpenAI specifically. So we're just going to go through the terms and the review process and what it entails. It's something that I've been through in the past before. So I thought this video would be helpful to people who are looking to take their prompts and create an application or software that other people can use and generate content with. So let's get into it and let's look at the OpenAI documentation. So we have these usage guidelines. These were updated on March 9th. For context, I sort of went through this process in February 2021, so it's slightly different to how it was back then. Some things have been loosened up slightly. Some things are still as strict as ever, and OpenAI is probably a technology that you will want to include in your tech stack if you are building out a software product using AI. There's a lot you can do with OpenAI, so it's worth including them, but it's also worth being in the know on what they entail and what you need to include. So first things first, they're saying that you can't use the API to generate certain types of content, and they provide a free content filter. The content filter is very important because you have to use it. If you are going live with OpenAI, you have to use a content filter. And pretty much what it means is when you send a request, it needs to go to the filter. The filter will return a number. It's either going to be 0, 1, or 2. If it returns a 2, you're supposed to show the user, sorry, this has hit the filter, we cannot return this content. So this is why if you are using a writing assistant application, there's many on the market. If you've tried to generate something and you've got that message that it's hit a filter, that'll be something that they have used from OpenAI, and it's not something that they have developed themselves. If you're using OpenAI, you are forced to use the filter every time. And it's quite funny because some applications will say that they've got this proprietary technology for this filter. In reality, they're just using OpenAI's filter. There's nothing more to it than that. And it has to be used. So they're saying, we provide this filter to ensure that it's being used for the intended purpose and to limit misuse. If you're using the API for research or building use cases, blah, 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 then you can contact them and they will help you out with your intended use. So there are what you'll find specifically with OpenAI is they have these terms, they have these usage guidelines, and it's very important to know that they are guidelines. So you are able to have a conversation with OpenAI if you feel that you want to build something which is slightly outside of what their guidelines say. But if you have thought of a way to do it and you have put safety practices and you've put your own sort of protections in place, then it's worth having that conversation with OpenAI. It's worth going to them, hey, we know your usage guidelines say this, but we've really thought about this and we feel that we can do it in this way with these protections, blah, 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 blah. And, you never know. They might say, okay, we can approve that. Or they can say, we might need more information. Or they might say, sorry, that's something that we definitely can't do. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then we go down to the specific prohibition of certain categories. So you can't use the API, you can't use AI to create hateful content, harassment, violence, self-harm, adult content, so anything sexual is completely out. Political, so if you're using it for campaigning or trying to influence political processes, you aren't allowed to do that. Spam, unsolicited bulk content, you aren't able to do that. So if you are creating a tool for outreach, icebreakers, that sort of thing, then you're going to find it possibly a little bit more difficult to get approved using OpenAI compared to some of the other technologies. Deception, if you're trying to mislead people, then OpenAI do not want you using their AI for this. And for creating malware, so if you're using the codex to try and create code to create some nasty software, ransomware, keyloggers, viruses, then that is something they don't want you doing. And then we go into the app review process. So As part of their commitment to safety and responsible API, we require API applications to go for a short review to ensure that they are complying with the policies. They welcome experimentation, and this is really good from OpenAI. They want you to try and break things in a way. They want you to use the API and to use the AI in ways that might be a little bit different to how they intended. But they're open for you to do this because it helps them improve their processes. It helps them improve the way that it works. So experimentation is encouraged, but you have to abide by the safety requirements when you are using the AI in an API. So if you are unsure whether you need to submit your application review, you should submit if any of the following are true. If you are sharing your prompts and people can use it, including internally with your team, and it's getting used by more than 10 people, then you need to go through a review process. If your application is available on the open web for anyone to use, you need to go through the review process. If you are charging or otherwise earning income from your application, you need to go through the review process, or if you're exceeding $250 of quota per month. So this is, if any of these are true, then you need to go through the review process. And this is really about, if you're letting other people generate content with your API key, then you need to do this. From the perspective of Riku, one way that we allow people to experiment, we allow people to build, and we allow people to sort of create their prompts in a safe environment, comparing all of the different technologies, is you bring your own API key. And because of this, it's just an experimental place, and we do not need to go through this process because we are allowing you to just use it on your own terms. Everything is logged to you. There's no end user involved. It is your key, your usage, and that all gets tracked back to you. So this is sort of the difference between going from experimentation, playful setting where you're building out and making your own prompts, to more of a setting where you've said, hey, I've made all this great stuff. I want other people to use it and to benefit from the AI and the magical things that I've done with my prompt creations or fine tuning or whatever else. So any of these are true, you need to go through this app review process. And they said that they will respond quickly to any questions about the process via their on-site chat. So you can just hit them up with the chat if you want to understand anything further. Any approvals applied to the application as it is presented in your submission. Significant changes in scope require additional review. You do not need to notify us about changes to the visual appearance of your application interface. Your API access may be revoked if you fail to submit your application for app review or launch without approval. If you are concerned about this, please reach out to support@openai.com immediately. So one of the things that I found when I did a review process for Content Villain in the past was they wanted to see every single one of our generators one by one in a live demo. So, I created an introductory video saying, hey, this is Content Villain, something that I've created. I'm gonna help people write content in various ways. We've created a bunch of these different generators, and then we created individual videos for each of those generators where we just sort of said, hey, this is our blog introduction generator. Here is me inputting some text. Here is me hitting generate, and here is the output it provides. And just by doing that, you can show OpenAI the way that it works in your UX, and everything is going to be fine. Obviously, like it says in their terms, if you are going to be changing your UX or changing your colors, like design changes which don't fundamentally change the application, then you don't need to notify them about visual appearances. But if you are adding more features, more generators, then you should do that. So there is the link to the application form, the review form here. It takes about 10 minutes to complete. 97% of applications get approved or conditionally approved with slight modifications. It takes 2 days to get the decision or a request for more information. And then we go into the default safety requirements for all applications. So every single application using OpenAI and OpenAI's technology needs to follow these safety requirements. So in general, deployed applications are required to adhere to the conditions below. So notice that it says in general here. So there are exceptions if you can prove to OpenAI that you have created something which can sort of bend the rules slightly because you thought of ways that you can mitigate the risks and make it work, then they are open to listen to those thoughts and comments, and you might get a special approval for something that other applications can't do. And that's very important to sort of understand and stress that these are guidelines. Generally, you will need to follow them, but they are quite flexible in how they review these things. So everything is on a case by case basis, and if you have thought about it and put in a good argument on why you need to do something, then they are receptive to listening to that. So the default requirements are you need to implement this content filter, like we said, provides a 0, 1, or 2. If it comes up as a 2, then you need to prevent those completions being returned to the end user. Every person who is using the API needs to be authenticated. So if it's not you or your organization using the API, then that person needs to have an account on your application. You can't just make a website like blogintroductions.com and somebody could just go and use it without logging in or without you knowing who they are. So it's a bit of like KYC, know your customer. If somebody wants to use a generator that you've created with OpenAI, then they are supposed to be somebody who you know via username or password, or they have a unique user ID so you can identify them. And the reason for this is because you are supposed to send a special field to OpenAI with this detail. So with OpenAI, you send the request as normal, but then you have a user field and you're supposed to send a unique identifier for each one. So OpenAI can see which user, they can't see any information about the user, they can't see the email, they can't see your name, they can't see anything. They see whatever you've put as your unique user ID. So it might just be like a 20 character string. I think with Content Villain, we just created a 25 character string. So we send that along with any requests to OpenAI, and if there's any problems or OpenAI were to get in touch, like they never have done, but they were saying, oh, this user is generating content that we can't allow, then we'd be able to track them down and have a talk with that user. But that has never happened. So there's it's safety in case it is needed, but luckily and fortunately, it has never happened for us that we've had to sort of take that further with anyone. And it's something that is thrust upon us from OpenAI. It's a condition of their usage. It's not something that we can control. So then we have this field here: limit the max tokens parameter to 250 per completion. So they don't want you to generate more than 250 tokens per completion. So this could be up to about 1,000 characters per completion, which is fairly generous, but in the playground, you can toggle that up to significantly higher than 250. So, this is one of those fields that I think if you can prove that you have an application with a need to generate larger amounts of text, then it's then it's worth having that conversation with OpenAI and explaining why you need to do that. So send no more than 1,000 characters of user input per request. Again, like this one, they don't want the user to be able to send large chunks of text. But if you could show that there is a reason why you want to do that, then it would be worth having that conversation with OpenAI. Abide by our content policy. So that is what we went through above with all of these things that you cannot do. And do not permit end users to input custom prompts. So you can't have users you can't have users using your own API key to create stuff that you can create within the playground. So you can't give a user the ability to use a playground under your own API key, and you can avoid this by using prompt engineering. So people cannot use open-ended usage, but you'll find that it's still possible in a lot of tools, but they are probably not using OpenAI for that matter. Do not permit automated social automated posting to other sites, including social media. So they don't. It makes sense. A lot of this AI technology, it creates content, not always factually correct. Always sort of, we recommend editing and going through it and making sure that it works for you and your needs. So they don't want you to fill the internet up with junk by just automating the outputs to social media. So that cannot be done. Do not permit automated execution of model generated code. So again, they don't want you to run code without checking it first and seeing if it is correct. Implement end user rate limits. So no user can use more than 60 generators per minute. So 1 per second. And you cannot allow bulk uploading for processing. So, one of the things that I see more and more running assistant tools doing now is allowing CSV inputs. So you can upload a CSV of text and different fields, and then it will generate on that CSV. If they are doing that, then they are highly likely not using OpenAI, because this would limit and forbid that happening within OpenAI's terms. You need to disclose clearly and periodically to users that they are interacting with an AI system. So, that's why you'll see that a lot of these AI tools will say AI generated content, AI everywhere, because you need to reinforce the fact that it is AI generated. There is no human involved. You cannot use an API key. This one is funny for me because we tried to bend the rules slightly with Content Villain back in the day with our human in the loop system, where it technically wasn't an API but kind of was an API, and we had some fun conversations with OpenAI about that back then. And unfortunately, we were unable to run it as intended back then. We have solutions now, but they've tightened this up slightly in the language in this to prevent anyone else using the API access from the technology. So it's good to see it's a bit more clearer than it was back then. I can't remember the exact terminology, but we had I figured that we had made a solution that fit by the terms, and we had some fun conversations with OpenAI about that. So avoid anthropomorphizing the AI system to end users in a way that could emotionally manipulate or confuse end users. So don't make people think that it's a human, because it's not a human, and don't do this because it can cause harm to people. So a lot of these things make sense. A couple of the rate limits and stuff like that is a little bit frustrating. This end user stuff is also a little bit frustrating. And the content filter is also a little bit frustrating, but generally you can understand why they do it. And if you want to use their technology, hey, you've got to agree to the terms. So it's not a lot you can do there. Please be sure to test your application to ensure that it works as intended. Test some bad inputs. This is one of the things that I remember that we had to do within the approval process back in 2021, March 2021, February 2021, I can't remember exactly when it was they wanted to see us put a bad input into a generator just to see how our application would respond. So they want to see the fact that it will throw a filter and how your application shows that filtered information. So testing it properly like you would as an end user with random stuff is worthwhile doing, and it shows that you are serious about your application, and it's just good practice really if you're launching something new. So depending on the application, we may require other safety mitigations. Take a look at our safety best practices for more information on how to build a safe application. So we'll get onto that in a minute. And then we have additional safety constraints for some types of applications. So there are specific things that they require specific steps for, and you'll see high stake domains. So some industries carry greater risk of harm, though may also bring social benefits. Applications of these domains will be subject to greater scrutiny and will be only approved when the risk can be managed and are outweighed by the benefit. So domains that are considered high stakes include, but are not limited to, anything legal. I get this because laws are always updating, things are always changing, new precedents are being set in different cases and different parts of the legal system. And a lot of this AI technology is trained up to a specific point. So by using AI to be able to come up with legal jargon or all of that stuff, if it's outdated, then needs to be proven that the person using the AI generator has some context of the area that they are trying to generate in. So if you are a lawyer and you are trying to use this technology and you can show that you are a trained professional lawyer and you've done due diligence and you can fact check and do all of this, then you're probably more likely to be approved than a 19-year-old kid trying to create something which will produce legalese for people who has no idea about the law or any of this other stuff. So again, government and civil services, it's an area where great care and attention needs to be taken. Again, medicine, healthcare, all of this stuff is quite sensitive and you don't want it to say the wrong thing. One example that I like to use when I talk about the weaknesses of AI and what could potentially happen is, if you were to create like a chatbot or something all about helping people with depression, and you were to have something where it would interact with somebody who was depressed and they were having a particularly bad episode and feeling particularly down, and then imagine if the AI said something bad, like maybe you should harm yourself or maybe you should do something terrible. Who is to blame for that? And that gets into quite an ethical and moral sort of question and argument, and OpenAI just trying to avoid stuff like that. So this is why these are high risk, and you can understand why these are high risk. Politics, news, and finance, all of this fake news and the way that it can affect different things. Coaching, guidance, or forecasting, relationship advice. Again, you can understand why this can have a big effect on people's lives if the AI comes up with something and they take it too literally, or they don't fact check it, or they don't know that it's from an AI and they think it's from a person. It becomes quite sensitive and it's quite a mess to go over. So these are the high stakes domains. If you are qualified in these areas, then there is no reason why you can't build with them, I'd say, but you need to make sure that you are putting the checks in place. If you are not qualified in these areas, I would just avoid them because it's going to be a headache to build anything worthwhile and to get the approval without being a professional in those areas. Then we get onto social media. So all application that involves social media must require a human to manually review and post the content, no automated or scheduled posting. So OpenAI is saying you cannot build something where you are generating an output and then automatically putting that on Facebook or automatically putting it out on Twitter or Instagram or wherever. They don't want you doing this. If you were to use Zapier to connect the two systems and do it automatically, that would be a breach of the rules. Or if you were to program that yourself, then yeah, that's not allowed. Tweet generation and Instagram post generation are disallowed. So if you have tried to create a tweet generator or an Instagram post generator, you cannot do that with OpenAI. It's something that I had a tweet generator as part of the content villain approval as one of the 50 plus models that we put up for approval at the start. And we just got told outright, you're not allowed to do that. And again, with the Instagram post generator, we weren't allowed to do that. A lot of the ways that I see people getting around these is to cleverly label them as, image caption generators for the Instagram post generators. And that seems to be a bit of a gray area that lets people get around this. If you don't specifically call it an Instagram post generator and you call it an image caption generator, then there are ways to do that. There were some companies that had legacy approval with some of these settings in the past, but now there are other options. If you want to create a tweet generator or an Instagram post generator, then you can use some other AI technology to do that who do not have these restrictions. Tweet classification is disallowed there may be exceptions for internal tools that are meant to analyze your own brand. So they're saying you cannot classify tweets if you're doing it commercially for other people, but if you're using it in-house for your own brand and optimizing your own marketing strategies or social media strategies, then that might be allowed, and it's worth having that conversation with them. Then we get on to chatbots, and chatbots are, they're full of issues with moral and ethical and different types of situations. So yeah, they can be a minefield in a way to run successfully. So the easiest type of chatbots to improve are productivity or customer service chatbots. Something that gives you motivational quotes, something that tells you, keep working, you're on the right track is going to be sweet. Something that is very linear in customer service and is very much on a direct path and it's unable to go off that path is something that they allow, but they don't generally allow the following: erotic, romantic, or companionship chatbots, hostile, hateful, or offensive chatbots, personas of specific people, especially without explicit consent from the person. So, people who, if you're trying to create a chatbot of like Michael Jackson, which is something that I've done with other technology, or anyone else, it could be an issue. But if you want to do historical figures from the past, like maybe you wanted to do like a Napoleon chatbot or a Shakespeare chatbot where you could ask Shakespeare questions, then that is something that they might allow. Chatbots that claim to have special wisdom, insight, knowledge, unless very clearly labeled as being for entertainment purposes only. So again, if you were to do something on some great sort of philosophers or that type of thing, you need to ensure that you are saying it's for entertainment purposes and you're not saying it's a serious thing. Applications allow users to create their own chatbots, except in certain circumstances, such as providing tailored customer service chatbots to other businesses. So they don't want you to let other people generate their own chatbots, but if you are creating a SaaS product where people can create their own customer service chatbots, then that is something that they might allow as well. So again, we get back to the point of all of these terms are guidelines. They are loose, but first things first, OpenAI will, if you are going to be sending an application to get your application reviewed, then the first things first, OpenAI will skim this list of their guidelines and they will see if there's anything that is obviously in the guidelines. If they see that, then they'll say, okay, this is outside of our guidelines. We won't be able to do that. And if you can't explain very well why you want to do that, and the fact that you haven't thought about why you want to do that, then it will get denied. But if you can say within your application, we've thought about this, we know that it's against your guidelines in this way, but we have put this protection in place, we've done this, we have expertise in this. If somebody was trying to use it wrong, then this would happen, blah, 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 blah. Then you're more likely to get some approval and some more like leniency to use it for that use case. So it's always worth thinking about ways that you can run this with your own expertise and try and bend the rules slightly, because if you can bend the rules and you get that approval, other people most likely haven't explained it in the way you have, and it gives you a competitive advantage over everyone else, because people would say, hey, I thought that couldn't be approved, but it can be if you can show that you have thought and you've done your due diligence, why you want to do this, and you can show that it's worthy for you to be able to do that with the technology. So lots of things to be thinking about when you go through this process. So to be approved, application areas may be subject to additional conditions, possibly including, again, like I've said, you need to have credible domain expertise. If you don't have credible domain expertise, then you probably won't get approved to these things. Needs to be a human in the loop, a qualified human in the loop. So anything legal, if there is not a legal professional in there, then you probably won't get approved. tracking and reporting accuracy metrics. So again, you will be required to look at the stuff that is generated and you'll be able to see how accurate it is, and you need to make a record of that and evidence to our satisfaction that your application complies with all applicable laws and regulations. So whatever country you're in, you need to make sure that you are you're complying with all of the law and regulation. Fairly simple. If they feel they need more information, they will follow up with you. So then we have the disallowed applications. We do not allow any applications that, anything that causes harm, anything that is founded on discredited or unscientific premises, classify people based on protected characteristics. So all of this is pretty obvious. You don't want to be doing this stuff. Extract protected personal information or other sensitive information from data about people. Help determine credit, employment, housing, or simple, credit checks, stuff like that. You can't do. Can't do payday lending, pseudo pharmaceuticals, gambling, multi-level marketing, all of this nasty stuff. Weapons development, warfare, cybercrime, deepfake, spam generation, non-consensual surveillance, or anything that would violate applicable law. You can't violate their terms. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to them again. So then we get on to the safety best practices, and we will go through these now. There's quite a lot to go through, so let's get into it. So to help you build your application safely and securely from the very start, we're excited to share with you a number of safety best practices drawn from our most successful developers. So these will ensure that your app is safe and it limits the possibility of it being misused or abused by others. We do not expect you to implement every single one of these, but it's just, it's a way for you to think about what you want to do and how you can make your app more secure for other people to use it. So at a high level, what should I keep in mind? We have 10 recommendations to help keep your application safe and successful. Don't let these best practices discourage you. Think like an adversary. Limit your input and output lengths. Know your customer. Rate limit pace of usage. Filter sensitive and unsafe content. Keep your application on topic. Capture user feedback. Keep a human in the loop. Draw upon validated content. So some of these things we sort of touched on earlier within this video. Let's just go over it in a little bit more details. They want to see people building and experimenting. They're a big advocate of building, experimenting, trying to break their system, and they understand that people are going to be doing this. So there's no harm in really taking these 10 recommendations as gospel, but it's worth sort of keeping them in mind. That might not seem safe, but grew. So your application might not seem like it might get approved and it might morph into something else than you thought it would originally be. So it's a way to, if you have an application and you're unsure of it getting approved, it's worth having the conversation and reaching out to OpenAI and looking at ways you can get this app ready for live production. Think like an adversary. So not everyone will use your product as it is intended, but careful upfront planning can reduce the likelihood and riskiness. So again, like we said, try and break your own application, try and put some unsafe content in it, see how that reacts, see how your application goes, and you can see if your filters are working as intended. Is everything working as intended? Is there a way for someone to breach your system at all, or is it is everything as it should be? You can consider asking some of your trusted users to be a specific red team to try and break it. So you can say to a couple of your users, please try and break my application if you can, to understand how they behave and how they react. A lot of the times when you're building something yourself, you forget about the way that other people will be using it. And by getting outsiders to try and break it, you might uncover certain things that you hadn't thought about, and it will help you get the security and the filters and everything in place that is needed. So again, we have limit your input and output length. You should avoid allowing input and output lengths of unbounded amount of tokens. Please limit these to only what is necessary to serve your application properly. So again, tokens divided by 4 will give you the character count. Maximum input, this is stuff that we've gone over. set the max tokens as is needed. Don't set it higher than you need because there's no point. It just doesn't help at all. Know your customers. So again, this is something that we went over. People need to log in. They need to provide a an email or a password, or they need to have done a social login like through Google or LinkedIn or Facebook. So anyone using or interacting with your app, you should know who they are, and it shouldn't be possible for people to make generations without having created an account first. So we've got provide a user identifier. This is something that we went over earlier. So every request that you send to OpenAI with a live app has to have this user field. So the user, and then you have a random string. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be any random 20 characters or 25 characters or whatever you want to do. And it just helps OpenAI to see which user is sending what in case there are any bad outputs that come or anything. I'm sure it's not something that we have found, that I found specifically. I've never been reached out to by OpenAI and said, hey, this user of this unique identifier has been generating poor content consistently. But I imagine if it does happen, then they could do that, and it could be grounds for you to terminate your relationship with that user or prevent them from using OpenAI's technology in the future. So that's why they have it. It's not a substitute for conducting one's own monitoring process. So you should still monitor, see how users are using your system. You can set this up in various ways if you want. Just something to bear in mind and keep on top of. Rate limit, pace for usage. So don't let people just hit generate constantly. Maybe do a maximum amount of usage for one user per week, per day, per month. It helps with fair usage guidelines and all of that. If you are seeing a particular user generate massive amounts of content, then you can rate limit them. And it's saying that you can consider limiting the number of IP addresses that a single user can use, blah, 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 blah. And this is something that happens. People might share accounts, or people might create some automated system to go into your app and just hit generate, a stupid amount of times, and you'll see a massive spike in activity. It's something that we've definitely seen in the past, and we've had to take actions to slow that down, because it's not good for us. It's not good for the technology if somebody is using automated methods to use your application. And generally, we say that people using our application need to be a human, and that's why we don't have, there isn't a way to interact with it as a computer unless you take that plan which doesn't use OpenAI's technology within something that we have within Content Villain itself, which is the API. But if you're using the web app, then we expect that to be used by a human, and that's reasonable, really. So filter sensitive and unsafe content. So again, they talk about their filter. They say if there are bad words, you might want to use regex or similar to replace those bad words with symbols or whatever. Prompt engineering to prevent sensitive or unsafe topic coming out. Fairly standard stuff. Keep your application on topic. Prompt engineering. Instruct series, which is the standard now. Nudging users towards acceptable queries. So, by putting in placeholders of information that is expected to be used, you can nudge people to putting that sort of information in there compared to other information. And the prompt engineering is really, really the main point here, because if you've created a prompt which is all about blog introductions and somebody tries to use it for something other than blog introductions, then you are not going to have a good output there. It's going to be hard to take the AI off track when it is specifically trained and the prompt is all about blog introduction. So it's a way to keep your application on topic compared to letting it go off topic. So number 8, we have capture user feedback. Give users tools to raise issues and help to improve your product's functionality. Make it easy for people to contact you. Monitor your social media, see what people are saying, see how people are using the product. Generally, just reach out to users, see what's going on, and ensure what's ensure that things are positive and you can improve and keep adding based on the feedback of your users, like you should with any product. And then we have keep a human in the loop. Keeping a human involved, it ensures that the tool is being used correctly. People need to edit their output. People need to fact check their output. Don't allow people to automatically post stuff onto other platforms. And that's fairly obvious to go. And then the final thing is draw upon validated content. Again, if you're using prompt engineering, putting a list of relevant things within the prompt will help it give out more generations of relevant things in the future. So that's generally where we are coming from here. And finally, safety and security are very important to us at OpenAI, of course. Yeah, if you see anything, then you can submit it. And then we go over the safety and risks again, where we just sort of go over some of these things and how this technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence can be used. Talks about some of the biases, talks about the risks, harms to consider, causing people distress, factual information, false information, discriminatory attitudes, incitement to violence. All of this stuff needs to be thought about, and you should definitely think about these things in a little bit of detail when you are deciding to build an application with AI. Robustness, again, we're just going over context matters, keep a human involved, keep testing, keep trying and seeing that you can use it as you want. Importance of fairness, again, bunch of information here to digest, and we finally are at the bottom. So a lot to go through there, and we've gone through it all, and I hope that hasn't put you off building with OpenAI, because their approval process is a lot more strict than some of the other technologies. For example, if you were to use AI 21, they have no approval process. As long as you've read their terms and your application is within their terms, you can go and push it live immediately. And if you're using something like GPT-J or GPT-NeoX from Alufra AI, they're open source models, so you can use them as you wish. But you probably want to include OpenAI within your application. And it's worthwhile to go through the approval process and go through the form for approval. It helps you think a bit deeper about your application, the use case, and how people will interact with the product. And it helps you to sort of help you build out these concerns and these safety requirements in a lot more detail. So I hope this video has been useful. I know it's a bit longer than the ones that we usually do, but I thought it was important that we go through all of the terms and all of the conditions of OpenAI and lay a lot of it out. At the end of the day, they are all guidelines, so try and submit something which might be bending the rules slightly, and if you can provide a reason why you need to do that and show that you've mitigated the risks, then there is a high chance that you might be able to get that approved. And if you have any questions about going live with OpenAI, then feel free to leave a comment below. It's something I've been through the process before, so I understand it, albeit it was over a year ago now. But ultimately, if there is something that you want to build with OpenAI and you're not sure about, then they're quite responsive on their live chat, or just send them an email and they will be able to help you out. One of the big advantages now compared to a year ago when I first sort of went for approval with an application is, back then there was no GPT-J, there was no NeoX, there was no AI 21, there was no Cohere, there was no Muse API, there was no Aleph Alpha. There was none of these other technologies. So you were pretty much bound by the restrictions of OpenAI, something which you are not now. So, for example, going through those terms, you saw us talking about tweet generators, Instagram post generators, something that is not allowed with OpenAI. But if you wanted to use one of the other technologies or build it with GPT-J or NeoX, which are open source, then you can do that and you can put that in your application, no problem. So competition is great for everyone. It helps to drive the whole industry forward. It helps to make these companies innovate, and it helps to make them compete, because ultimately they all want your business. They all want you to use their technology because they get money. So yeah, OpenAI has a lot of advantages. The review and the approval process is a bit of a disadvantage because it's quite cumbersome and can be quite long, but it's worth going through for sure, because it helps you to think about your product in other ways that you might not have thought about. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you are building out a product and you want to test all of the best large language models in a single place, then there is no better place to do it than Riku.ai. We have all of these technologies in a wonderful playground where you can quickly experiment, build, contrast, see how a prompt would interact with one of these models compared to another, compare OpenAI's DaVinci against Cohere's extremely large, compare the jumbo model from AI21 against Curie. You just mix and match, you have a lot of fun, and it's very easy to do. So we'd love to have you on board and help you with your AI building. And if you found this video useful, feel free to leave a like or subscribe, as it really helps us.